Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, this is a channel you guys seem to really enjoy me taking a look at, so we're going to take a look at Chat History again. He does a great job with his videos. They're very entertaining, very interesting, and very informative, which is really all we can ask for in a channel, right? He's got 266,000 subscribers, so if you like what you see, click on the link down in the description, go check out his channel, watch some of the other videos, and subscribe if you like it. So this one just came out. And by the time you see it, it should have been out for about a week or so because I'm recording some videos ahead since I'll be on vacation. But this is Evil Kings That Did Evil Things, and it should make for a really interesting topic of discussion. Haven't watched the video yet, but I have in my mind a few ideas of who he might talk about. So let's go ahead and dive in and see what happens.
Doing evil things.
Oh, of course Nero's got to be first.
Hey, he wasn't a king. Yeah, you're right. While some of the guys on this list weren't kings by title, they held very high positions of power nonetheless. So, to you I say...
And so Nero, I mean, we call him emperor. It wasn't really the title that the Romans used. They basically used a word that meant that they were first among citizens. So basically they were the first citizen. They were the highest of a bunch of people who all were citizens of Rome.
Moving on. Emperor Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, or just Nero to his friends and enemies, was the very last Roman emperor of the less than impressive Julio-Claudian dynasty, which lasted from 27 BC to 68 AD. Like any complete psycho, Nero had a pretty complicated childhood.
So Julio-Claudian dynasty, because they all had some relationship to each other. Typically it was by adoption, but there was often a genetic component as well. Like Nero is descended from some of these others. So you're talking about Augustus being the first emperor of Rome, followed by Tiberius, followed by Caligula, then Claudius, and then Nero.
When Nero was just a wee Nerite at the age of 3, his daddy went and abandoned the family by dying. Mom got exiled to a tiny island for maybe attempting to kill Emperor Caligula. Caligula got killed anyway. Mom is unexiled and marries the new emperor, Claudius, which happens to be her uncle, by the way. The public is all, ugh. And now little Nero has a great uncle emperor dad who has proclaimed him to be the new heir to the throne. I love you, Uncle Daddy. That's all.
So let's take a look real quick at his family tree because there are some interesting things going on here. So it's really complicated because you have all these adoptions that go on, but if we're talking about biologically speaking, so Nero's dad is this guy here, Gnaeus Domitius Aenobarbus, and he is actually a son of Antonia Major, who was the daughter of Octavia Minor, who was the sister of Caesar Augustus, and was also the daughter of Mark Antony. So Nero is a descendant of Mark Antony through his father's side. And then on his mother's side, his mother is Agrippina the Younger. And she is the daughter of Germanicus and Agrippina the Elder. Again, really complicated stuff here. But her father, Germanicus, was the nephew of Tiberius. And her brother was Caligula. Nero is descended from Caesar Augustus. He's descended from Mark Antony. So it's just this crazy tangled web of things in this Julio-Claudian dynasty that we have going on.
A lot to deal with as a child, but the sweet birthday presents help you quickly forget. So why did this happen? Because Nero's mom, Agrippina, was a political savage.
Yeah.
Her only interest was power. So much so that, to prevent a revenge plot, she had the recently stabbed Emperor Caligula's widow accused of black magic, banished, and even convinced her to fully deplete her own health bar. Now, she wants her baby boy Nero to be emperor, and in 54 AD, that's what happened. Emperor Claudius died under mysterious circumstances. Mysterious in the sense of having a potentially poisonous mushroom just absolutely slammed down his gullet by Agrippina herself. Maybe. But since the board game...
This is one thing we don't talk enough about when it comes to the history of the Roman Empire, is how much some of these women really played a huge role in terms of their influence, in terms of their relations, in terms of their scheming, every bit as much as what the men were doing.
Game Clue had yet to be invented. Forensic puzzle solving was pretty minimal. Oh my god! Put that knife down! Someone's just been murdered! Coincidentally, Nero's stepbrother, Britannicus, who had claim to the throne, also decided to expire around the same time under mysterious circumstances. So now, at just 16 years old, Nero is emperor.
Yes! Yes!
So how did he do being emperor? He actually started off pretty well. He banned capital punishment, expanded the arts, gave disaster relief aid to neighboring cities, reduced taxes, and even gave some rights to slaves.
Banned capital punishment, a guy who's known for his use of capital punishment. It's interesting how, when we think of like the early Roman Empire and we think of absolutely horrible emperors, the first two that come to mind are Nero and Caligula. And in both cases, you can point to early reign, decent stuff they did, and then more tyrannical and more horrible as time goes on.
Seems like a pretty nice guy, actually. Uh-oh, this is getting clickbaity. We're already 2 minutes in. Where's all the evil stuff? Well, for one, he married his stepsister as a power move, which is gross, but not evil. Since their relationship was void of any real love, Nero started poking around in other women's hoo-has, one of which was Poppaea Sabina, a local town babe who was already married. Well, Nero pops Poppaea and puts a baby in her belly. This little stunt ticked off his mom, who was trying to maximize power through having a mentally stable emperor son.
And Poppaea is going to be another one of those people that she's a woman who is going to play a huge role in this, not necessarily due to her direct scheming like Nero's mom, but more because of how much she gets desired by other men who want the throne.
Since Nero didn't think that his mom's attitude was very cash money of her, he had her assassinated, but made it look like an accident. This is regarded as the turning point in Nero's reign, and when all the ancient shit started to hit the ancient fan. He began going a bit kill happy. Next, he divorced.
Sometimes people, they don't cross a line for a while, but once they cross that line and they realize they can get away with it, then all hell breaks loose. And there are people who make statements about this, about how you don't want the lion to know his own strength, that sort of thing. When the lion figures out that he can do what he wants, look out. Although it didn't work out so well for Nero in the end.
Divorced his stepsister, had her exiled, killed, and took her head as a trophy, apparently under Poppaea's influence. But not to worry, Nero did a 360, turned around, and forward smashed Poppaea and their unborn child off stage. That's one problem taken care of. Nero went unhinged. He had several close friends and political rivals murdered, had a former slave castrated, then married him, and...
that is Sporus, I think was the name of this slave, because she looked like Poppaea, or he looked like Poppaea, and they turned him into a woman, and so now he becomes the one that kind of gets fought over by potential claimants to be emperor.
Even had a senator murdered just because his expressions were too boring. Oh, would you look at that? I'm dying now. Okay. But Nero's crowning moment in history comes in the year 64, where he allegedly started a small fire in a suspiciously flammable merchant shop. According to some sources, Nero wanted to make way for a newer, more elegant, and ornate palace. And you know what they say, in order to make an omelet, you have to burn down your city. About 71% of Rome was destroyed in the Great Fire in 64 AD. There's rumors that Nero shredded on the fiddle or lute during all this.
There was no fiddle at that time, and Nero wasn't even in Rome when this all went down.
But there's no actual proof of that claim. But could you imagine? Eventually...
The whole point of a lot of these stories that come after the fact is that once you have branded someone as evil and a tyrant, this happens all throughout history. Then all these stories kind of get backtracked, like they get backdated and say, like 20 years after the event, they say, oh, well, by the way, when that fire was going on, which Nero was responsible for anyway, he was playing some music and just not trying to do anything. But as much as there's plenty of stuff to go after Nero for, I think that one's far-fetched. And in fact, there seems to be some evidence that he did try to do something about it. But in the aftermath, he kind of rebuilds the city the way he wants it, builds a huge palace, and so it becomes an easy target for people to say, oh, well, the only reason he did any of that, he wanted there to be room to build a new palace, so that's why he started the fire, that's why he didn't do anything to stop it. It just kind of became easy stuff to say after.
Nero's frequent and dangerously wacky antics forced the Senate to declare him a public enemy.
And he kind of skips over the fact that You know, we think a lot about Christians being persecuted during the Roman Empire, but it wasn't like there were hundreds of years in which Christians were constantly being persecuted. There are a couple of key moments where there's heavy persecution of Christians. Nero is the first one. And there's not a lot of evidence that he spent a lot of time throwing a bunch of Christians to the lions. And of course, the Colosseum doesn't even exist yet during this point. It doesn't open until 80 AD, long after Nero's gone. But he did, like, he would throw garden parties and he would have Christians lit as human torches. So he definitely did make Christians a scapegoat for this fire and did heavily persecute them. This is when the Apostle Paul and the Apostle Peter are both going to be executed during Nero's reign. And then you have another substantial persecution of Christians that happens under Diocletian. And I think maybe Domitian had some of that too. But there's a few times in history where it happens, but it doesn't happen steadily for hundreds of years.
But Nero said that he wouldn't be taken alive. And he wasn't.
No.
He went from 0 to 0 by slamming a knife into his own neck, thus ending his 13-year reign. Talk about a Nero death experience.
Wow. Wow, dude. Wow. Okay.
You may not think it by looking at him, but this tall glass of lukewarm pond water was once the most influential and feared kings in Europe in the late 1400s. This is Ferdinand I of Naples, aka Ferrante. He was the illegitimate son of King Alfonso the Magnanimous of Aragon.
Oh, I was about to correct him. I was going to say it says Aragorn there, but yeah. Remember, this is a time when Spain is not united yet. So you've got Aragon and Castile. And so, you know, Ferdinand and Isabella, that's where it kind of gets united.
Not Aragorn. Aragon is over in Spain. Naples is over in Italy. Geography. When Alfonso left this mortal coil, Ferdinand inherited the crown at Naples at the age of 35. Now listen, if you're going to control a kingdom, seldom do kind kings succeed. Though he did bring about 20 years of peace and prosperity to his own kingdom, he was cruel and vile to his enemies, which...
I would take a little bit... I understand what he's saying, that you do, as a monarch at this time in history, have to be fairly ruthless when the time calls for it. But there's a difference between being like Henry VIII or Nero when it comes to your power, and being tough and you know, hard on your enemies when you have to. You can be tough but fair. You don't have to be a tyrant in order to exert your rule over people and make sure you hold on to it.
I mean, makes sense. You can't conquer with forgiveness and love, you would just get conquered yourself. That being the case, Ferdinand got a reputation for being rather ruthless. Basically, if you crossed the guy or got on his bad side, you were marked for an unpleasant death. An example of this was early on in his reign in 1462, when several nobles led a revolt against him, trying to put some ham-hock of a human on the throne instead. But Ferdinand put a swift end to that gaggle of rabble-rousers, and the nobles were put in the corner.
So, you mentioned Anjou there. Anjou is something we don't hear a lot today, but Anjou is a pretty influential area in France, and you actually had a whole dynasty in England, the Angevins. We call them the Plantagenets today, but at the time they were the Angevins. And where did they get the name Angevin? Well, it was from the House of Anjou. It's the Angevins from Anjou who come to the throne of England for hundreds of years.
After many years of keeping his enemies in check, the Ottoman Empire decided it was time to do Ottoman Empire things and invaded Naples in 1480. The southeast region of Salento fell to the Furniture Empire after a few weeks.
The Furniture Empire. All right, I'll allow it.
This caused Ferdinand to panic and declare that everyone should be all hands on deck to fill the kingdom's coffers to fight back the invading Ottomans, and were eventually successful. But the heavy tax burdens pissed off the no-good, unthankful nobles. They led yet another rebellion against Ferdinand, to which he said, okay.
So this is like the story of medieval Europe, right? Is the balance between how heavily can I tax my people in order to fight the wars that are necessary to protect what we have or to gain new territory, and how far is too far, and when do I back down? And it's that story of the nobility rebelling against the monarch heavily taxing, backing off or getting overthrown. It's just a mess.
And seized their property and wealth. The nobles gave up yet again, but Ferdinand wanted to put an end to this once and for all. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, you're fucking dead. So Ferdinand set up a meeting to grant the rebels amnesty and forgiveness.
I love the subtle subscribe sign right there in that one.
At said meeting, a deal was struck and the rebels were quickly forgiven, and also quickly murdered. As a warning to any future conspirators, King Ferdinand had their bodies mummified, stuffed, dressed, and put on display in what he called his Black Museum.
Oh, yeah.
Listen here, Ferdinand.
I know about this.
I think some things need to change around here. Oh, really?
I remember reading about this. I just didn't realize this is who the guy was. That is the way you send a message in a time before TV and radio and kind of advertising exists.
You know, you're doing such a good job as king. Excuse me while I go and unshit my pants. Ferdinand eventually died of butthole cancer, and Naples fell to the French soon after. Now the title lame here isn't what you think it is. Instead of being lame like some dumb nerd, Timur was lame in the sense of being disabled. While committing casual sheep theft, as children do, young Timur took an arrow to the knee and an arrow to the hand, which caused lifelong injury. But do you think being reduced down to the usefulness of a cup of tapioca pudding is going to stop this future conquering warlord? Definitely not.
There are times in history where more often than not, you think of the strong, the powerful, the brave on the battlefield being the ones who rise to the top. But there's another way, and it has to do with your intellect and your scheming and your cunning. I think of people like Alfred the Great in England, and of course Octavian, who becomes Caesar Augustus. These were not strong, powerful, just kind of used their force and might personally to rise to the top.
In fact, little Timur grew up to be an extremely cruel but highly intelligent and effective military tactician. Through his efforts, the Turco-Mongol warlord conquered most of Western and Central Asia, Caucasia, Persia, the Middle East, and parts of South Asia and Eastern Europe by 1404, all while forming an empire to call his own, the Timurid Empire. Not bad for running on a 50% limb deficit.
Didn't last very long, though.
During his conquests, he spread destruction and terror almost everywhere he went, because that's kind of what conquerors do. Remember, real power is taken, not given.
And the difficulty is when you conquer a lot of land really fast. Think of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, first the Roman Republic and then the Empire, but we kind of just call it the Empire. Their growth was slow for the most part. I mean, there were moments, but was slow, but they would assimilate the peoples into the Roman Empire. Yes, they would use fear and intimidation and military might, but they weren't conquering, like they weren't tripling their territory overnight. They were slowly adding in such a way that allowed them to be able to grow and create the infrastructure and everything necessary to keep it for long periods of time. A lot of these empires that sprout up quickly tend to die quickly or tend to fracture within a generation or two of the person who conquered them.
Throughout these campaigns, Timur's actions gained him quite an infamous reputation, placing him amongst other horrifying legends. One such action was the massacre of Isfahan. Formerly a Persian city, Isfahan was a flourishing hub of art, medicine, music, philosophy, and architecture, which meant it had wealth. A thriving city is great and all, but when you have no army to defend it, you're basically just begging for a pillaging. Oh no, I hope no one takes my hard-earned money. Ugh, my coins are just spilling out. Please don't plunder me pockets. Is this a sexual thing? It could be. So with little to no defense in place, Timur waltzed right in and was all, this is mine now. And Isfahan was all, fair enough, surrendering immediately. As an act of mercy, Timur spared the population, did some light looting, and left some soldiers in command as he went on his next conquest.
And this is a calculated risk that you take when you are facing a conqueror, is that do we resist and risk them heavily plundering, destroying, murdering, hauling off slaves, Or do we immediately surrender and hope that they'll be gentle with us if we know the end result is going to be the same?
Well, a few young hooligans decided to be heroes and murdered Timur's soldiers. Bad move. Timur caught wind of this and immediately hightailed it back to Isfahan. In a completely level-headed and reasonable response, he ordered the slaughter of every man, woman, and child in the city. He gave each of his soldiers a quota of heads to bring him. If they failed to collect the craniums, they would lose their own noggins to add to the count.
So this is, again, at a time when you don't have radio and television and internet and mass communication. You want to send a message, and this absolutely sends a message. Don't touch my soldiers. It's horrible and it's cruel, but when you're conquering a lot of territory, you absolutely have to do this kind of thing.
One by one, each citizen was cut down. Almost the entire population of 100,000 people, including all livestock, were murdered. Piles of skulls were scattered around the city as testaments to the horrific act. Look, taking your revenge against those who directly defied you is one thing, but when tens of thousands of innocent civilians become collateral damage to your blind wrath, that's when things cross over into evil territory. One surviving prisoner stated that Timur, quote, ordered the women and children to be taken to a plain outside the city, and ordered the children under 7 years of age to be placed apart, and ordered his people to ride over these same children. When his counselors and the mothers of the children saw this, they fell at his feet and begged that he would not kill them. He would not listen and ordered that they should be ridden over, but none would be the first to do so. He got angry and rode himself among them and said, "Now I should like to see, who will not ride after me?" Then they were obliged to ride over the children, and they were all trampled upon. There were 7,000. Yeah, Timur was a pretty bad dude. And that's really just one example of his many atrocities. By the time of his death in 1405, it is estimated that Timur's conquest caused the death of over 17 million people, which was about 5% of the world's population at the time.
And this is roughly the number of civilian and military deaths from the First World War. Dang.
Pretty solid kill streak. The Xia dynasty, the very first dynasty in ancient China, is estimated to have been founded around 2070 BC and remained in power for several hundreds of years, until this guy showed up. King Jie was the last ruler of the Xia dynasty, which most certainly means that he royally fudged up in some shape or form. So what happened?
Or he just died without a proper person to come after him. I mean, sometimes that's what happens to end a dynasty, is that it's not that you were conquered by someone else, it's just that there was no one left. That's what happens with the Tudor dynasty. After Elizabeth I, the crown, Henry VIII was an only son of Henry Tudor that had children of his own because his brother Arthur died young. And so he has 3 children who all come to the throne, none of whom have children of their own. And so the dynasty just dies out and it goes to his sister's great-grandson.
Not surprisingly, Jie had a reputation as a cruel tyrant. He was the big cheese around these parts, and he wanted everyone to know that at all times. But you could argue that Jie was ahead of his time, because instead of focusing on ways to better his empire, like any good emperor would, he only sought ways to make life better for himself and his closest buddies.
It's a pretty common theme. I mean, you see that a lot with the Roman emperors. That's kind of what was happening with Caligula and Nero we talked about earlier, is that some people genuinely try to make life better for the people that they rule. It doesn't mean they're not also capable of conquest and capable of ruthlessness when required, but you can at least look and see how they tried to make things better, even if they were misguided in the way that they did it.
Like modern politicians. He also loved spending money. Tons of it. He would drain the kingdom's coffers on frivolous activities like luxurious palace upgrades, endless entertainment, and smashing some gash with the royal concubines. When he ran out of money, he would either raise taxes to continue to fund his lifestyle, or randomly invade small neighboring towns to relieve them of their hard-earned money and their women.
I never understand why people don't see that if you do this long enough, it's hard enough in a time when killing and conquering is a way to take a throne from someone. I have a hard time believing that these people can't see how they should do all they can to keep the people closest to them happy, and the people under them happy, so that they'll want to continue to keep them in that position and not try to take it for themselves.
On one particularly lucrative expedition, Jie decided to ravage the local Yu Shi clan. Open up, Yu Shi. I know you're in there. Oh, sorry.
Yoshi.
Wrong clan. There we go. The Yu Shi clan didn't want to put up a fight because they knew they would get their shit kicked in, so they instantly surrendered. As you can see, they were pretty smart. The clan offered up a substantial bounty of riches for King Jie to hit the road. But since the king had a boner for spilling blood, he felt flaccid and defeated by an enemy who quickly gave up without a fight. Before King Jie could act, the chief of the Yu Shi clan offered one more prize, a beautiful woman by the name of Mo Shi. Enamored by her obvious beauty, King Jie swiftly accepted the offer. I love you. Jie became unhealthily obsessed with Mo Shi, trying anything and everything to please her. He once had servants dig a lake and fill it with wine so the couple could bathe, drink, and flop around on and in each other. I mean, the lake was just full of completely disgusting fluids. Now that it was properly flavored, 3,000 men were then commanded to drink the lake dry. They drowned. After learning that his nearest, dearest, darlingest love weirdly enjoyed the ASMR pleasures of tearing silk, he demanded that the finest silks from the farthest reaches of the kingdom be brought before him so he could rip them for her.
Subscribe. So, what I'm seeing here is obviously a person with obsessive personality. And when he finds something that he obsesses over, he wants as much of that as he can. He was obsessing over bloodshed and wealth and spending, but now he has found a new focus for his obsession. And so he's going to, again, just all common sense goes out the window when you are that focused on something that you're obsessed with.
All these dumbass endeavors continued to clear out the kingdom's already scant reserves, so it was time to fundraise. Okay, fellas, taxes are going up again. What the fuck, Jie? We can't afford to live like this. You don't understand. I'm this close to getting her to notice me. Stop being a simp. All right, that guy, someone kill that guy. You're still a simp, you know. I know. Basically, over the next several years, all the pissed off and neglected subjects and neighbors started feeling pissed off and neglected. So they turned their attention to a newer, cooler guy. Instead of Jie of Xia, now they wanted Tang of Shang.
So, we talked earlier in this video about not wanting a person in power to figure out how much power they have. Well, the reverse is also true. If you're the person in power, you don't want the people to figure out what they're capable of if they put all of their weight behind someone else or just in opposition to you. You don't want them to figure out what happens if they can band together, and that's what they're going to do here.
How funny is that? After many years of gaining political power and support around the country, Tang of Shang built an army, revolted, and eventually defeated and captured King Jie, stripping him of his kingship. Around 1600 BC, the Xia dynasty had fallen after about 500 years of rule.
Jeez.
Jie eventually died of natural causes as a penniless commoner.
Oh yeah, this guy's not good.
Evil can be subjective. What could be viewed as an act of evil by one group may be celebrated and revered by another. For instance, Vlad the Impaler's cruel acts of, well, impaling 20,000 people may be seen as wicked and sadistic by most, but to Romanians, he's seen as a hero.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to that idea of propaganda and influence and using acts of cruelty to send a message to your enemies. Don't mess with me because this is what happens. Lots of examples. We love to focus on examples like Vlad the Impaler, but he only did what many who came before him did, just had a new twist on it. Because
he defended his homeland from the invading Ottoman Empire. But then there's just completely unjustifiable evil assholes, like King Leopold II of Belgium. What do you think of when you think of Belgium? Waffles? Chocolate? Well, how about indigenous genocide? Yeah, In case you didn't know, the Belgian crown was once in possession of one of, if not the, bloodiest European colonies in African history.
Congo.
At the Berlin Conference in 1884, King Leopold II sought to expand his fortune by staking claim to the Congo, over 900,000 square miles of African rainforest in the present-day Democratic Republic of the Congo.
So this is a time when the modern nations of Europe that we know today have been formed throughout the 1800s. Germany at this point is less than 2 decades old as an empire. Italy has just been formed in the previous couple of decades. Belgium's only 50 years old at this point. So everybody's staking their claims now to, you can't gobble up territory in Europe because you've got this whole balance of power thing where they're trying to keep peace in Europe. So what do? You can't go to South America anymore because all of those countries have broken free from European rule, and you've got the U.S. trying to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. So now everybody's going to Africa and the South Pacific.
To sweeten the deal, Leo formed the International African Association under the guise that it was for humanitarian and philanthropic purposes. Also to establish free trade between the European countries, which was the real selling point. With that, the other colonizing European countries of France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and the United Kingdom welcomed Belgium's claim to the land, and King Leopold II was now the sole owner of the ironically named Congo Free State. But there was nothing free about it. King Leo's only interest was to extract as much resources and wealth from the land by any means necessary.
And that's what most of these European powers are doing with these places like the South Pacific and Africa. It's just some go about it in a nicer way, I guess you would say. Not that it's ever nice to exploit a group of people and take all their resources for yourself, but nobody did it quite the way the Belgians did.
In order to do that, he needed manpower. So he forced new laws on the Congolese chieftains to implement within their own communities. Those who resisted were swiftly eradicated by other Congolese communities who were backed by the Belgian crown. Initial collection and trade of precious ivory exports weren't the best for profit margins, so not as much money was being made as expected, causing the colony to fall into massive debt. But with the invention and development of automobiles in the late 1800s, the demand for tires shot through the thatched roof. In order to make tires, you need rubber. Lots of rubber. Where does rubber come from? Rubber trees. And boy, let me tell you that the Congo had some rubber trees. After establishing his own personal African army called the Force Publique to enforce rule, King Leo extracted a fortune through blood.
So remember, Belgium's not a big country. It's not a mighty country when it comes to its military, its navy, army, anything like that. So you've got to use what you've got on the ground there in Africa.
Millions of Congolese natives were enslaved and forced to harvest and process rubber from the Congo with the main goal of maximizing production at all costs. Those who were unable to meet a labor quota were sometimes murdered on the spot. Those who refused to work were savagely beaten with their villages raided and destroyed. This system, called the Red Rubber System, led to the utter collapse of the Congolese economy and culture. It should be noted that King Leo never stepped foot in the Congo himself. He left all of his dirty work to hand-picked Belgian officials who ruled as they pleased.
And who went there and then used certain people within Congo to exploit other people. And so, you suddenly are finding yourself with a lot of power and authority, and when you give people free rein, a lot of people abuse that.
Often contributing their own atrocities against the native people. One particularly nasty official was Leon Fiebes. He was notorious for punishing underperforming slaves by having their hands cut off. He claimed that it was a
I'm telling you, what they can't do without hands is perform better.
way to settle the debt of labor owed to him. The Force Publique soldiers were in charge of collecting these debts, and they were even rewarded for the amount of hands they could collect.
Jeez.
With that mentality, they would often resort to cutting the hands off of working slaves to cheat the system.
Wow.
This actually ended up pissing the king off because how the hell are slaves supposed to work with no hands? There were several other issues that plagued the Congo as a direct result of Belgian brutality. All of the development and forced labor caused the vast majority of farming to come to a dead halt, leading to extreme famine and even more deaths. Children who were orphaned during the colonization were kidnapped and forced into Catholic schools where they would learn to work or be soldiers.
You know, all of this just makes me think, you know, we see stuff on the news about things like this happening in places like Africa, sometimes in the Middle East and other places. And we think, how on earth, you know, we look back at stuff like this and we think, man, what a horrible time to be alive. But then we see that it's still happening today. And in a time and place when we have more ability than ever to deal with stuff like that, it still goes on.
Fatal diseases ran rampant through the Congo, including smallpox, amoebic dysentery, and the parasitic trypanosomiasis, also called the sleeping sickness, which caused mass insomnia and painful muscle spasms. Through the culmination of these atrocities, historians estimate that roughly 5 to 10 million Congolese people lost their lives during Belgium's reign over the Congo from 1885 to 1908. Thanks to missionaries who secretly documented these atrocities, the public was informed of the horrors of the Congo. The Belgian public, who had no knowledge of these actions, caused an uproar. After much...
So imagine your government's doing all this stuff and you have absolutely no idea, and they think that they're keeping it quiet, but there are people on the ground who sometimes all it takes is 1 or 2 or 3 people who are willing to do the right thing. And recognize, hey, I can't stop this directly. Like I can't, you know, I don't have the power to be able to end what's happening, but I can get the word out. And maybe if I get the word out, then people who are in a position to do something will do it.
To public outcry around the world, including famous writers like Mark Twain and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the Belgian parliament forced King Leopold II to cede the Congo Free State to Belgium itself in 1908. But not before he could destroy any and all documented evidence of his wrongdoings that he could find. The Congo Free State was changed to the Belgian Congo, then the Republic of the Congo, then the Democratic Republic of the Congo, since its western neighbor had the same name. King Leopold died a year later in 1909, and the public dunked on his funeral with loud booing and heckling. Even today, many Belgians are ashamed of their late monarch's atrocious behavior and demonstration of how evil a human could be. Fun stuff, right?
People, when people are put in positions where there's no restraint, often the worst comes out. It's true in war, it's true in peace, it's true among monarchs, it's true among the average person. It's just the reality. So that's dark stuff, but it's part of history. So let me know what you think. Use the comment section below. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.